Hi, today I want to show you how you can create amazing email capture experiences with animations and even email suggestions that populate dynamically from either your variable or your database using Wized and Webflow. So let's get started. So if I'm going to type in, for example, Joe, right? And now nothing spectacular happens, but the moment I add an ad, you will see that we have this accordion or the suggestions panel basically expand, giving us all the options that we have. Of course, I could now start typing basically whatever I want, but I can also consider those options. So let's do joe@wized.com. Now, the cool thing is it will automatically now just turn it into joe@wized.com. Now, let's say we correct that and it will automatically now say it's not a complete email yet. Here are your suggestions. Of course, you can type whatever you want. You could do .cc or .com, and if it's now matching again, it will stop the recommendations because it will validate it as a real email, not going through Xano, all happening on client side. Or .co, but the moment it doesn't match anymore, it's giving me the suggestions right here, and I can change it. I can do Yahoo, or I can say, let's try Gmail here, or let's do Wized again. And now, if I try to submit this and it's not correct, it's going to give me a little prompt. Just like that. And look how nicely this animates in. It's just like fading in there very gradually. And this happens with all NoCode and no Webflow animations. But now, if I'm going to go, for example, and do .com, oh, I just enabled extra mode by mistake, but you will see that both accordions disappear. Now again, if I try to submit this here or click on Wized.com, it will correct it, it will update the input, but it will then just remove the suggestions and the error message. And yeah, I want to show you how to do this today because this is all happening no code with the animations to create this wonderful, beautiful user experience. So let's start with the Webflow part because this is where the animation magic happens. And then we're going to go to the Wized part because this is the control center basically where we're going to start and initialize those wonderful no code and no Webflow animations happening in Webflow. So let's go to the Webflow side and we will see that we just start with a normal form block here because this is just basically a form. And now in the form block, I just have my form component. Now in the form component, I have like an input field, which is just a div block that is styled like an input field so that we can have like the button right next to it. And in here, we have the actual input field, right? That is the one that will just have the name of email. We'll have the placeholder right in here. And we don't want to set it to an email because if we set it to an email, we get like this generic HTML styling, which is basically what we try to avoid in this video to make it look nice. So we're just going to go with plain. Now that's the setup for this part. Now in here, we have the form submit button, which is just a custom element with the tag of button and the type of submit. Very important. It needs to have the type of submit in order to properly submit the form. That's it. And then we just have like the icon in there. Now we have this thing that doesn't really exist because I have a class on here. But, and look, the transition here, we have basically a div block in here that has a combo class on it. And basically the combo class, and I'm going to go in detail in here. But this div block here is basically just a relevant div block. And we just have some styling applied to here. And important, we're going to add a transition of 400 milliseconds on top of that. This transition, which we add on the main component, not on the secondary, that will be already applied, but we add that on the main component because whenever we switch, you see we get this nice transition effect. And it doesn't happen by itself, but when we add the combo class, this is how it transitions the state. Now we need to change the state in order to get the transition effect. Otherwise, it just stays the way it is. And in order to do that, we're going to do a few things. We have 0.5 rem, and we're going to change this to minus, so minus 0.5 rem. And we're going to set the height to 0 rem. And we're going to change the position to z-index, oh, what did I do here? To z-index -1. And now here comes the important thing. We're going to go to 3D transformations, and we do this to 90. If it's at 0, it will basically be like this. If it's at 90, it's like this. So it's flat. So we get like this effect that it moves over. So we're going to do this position so that will go from this to this. So we're going to do 90. Wonderful. And as you can see, the transition it will be like this. And the moment I apply it on, it will move like this. And then just move like this. But if I wouldn't, for example, set it to 0, it will just look like this. Look at that. We will have it like this and it will fade. But we still have this padding. So in order to get rid of that, we're just going to set the height to 0. And we're going to add the minus 0.5 just to make sure that there's no padding on top of that. But basically everything we will be doing here to create these animations is working with Webflow combo classes. So this transition effect will just happen if we move from this state of the element to this state of the element. We have a different state, we have a different height, we have a different transformation. And what will give this illusion of that it is an animation is the transition of 450 milliseconds we have applied to the parent of it, the parent class, to have this transition go over. And in Wized, we're just going to simply set class. So let's keep this collapsed. Or actually, let's expand this because let's talk about what's in it. In it, we have just the simple scroller so that we can scroll it. So we just have a div block that is going 1 rem down and 1.5 rem up. So we get this little slide bar cut off by the parent element, which will have the overflow hidden to cut that off. So we don't get this ugly scroll bar. And then we just have to set to auto so we can scroll it. That is what we're going to do with that. And then in here, we have the email clients. Just a custom component as a button, using the Webflow custom element as a button. And we add the Wized attribute of email client item in there because we're going to render this dynamically. And I forgot to mention, of course, in this suggestions panel, we also have the Wized attribute applied to it of email client suggestions panel so that we can set the class to transition between those states based on a condition directly in Wized. And also, of course, on here, we have the Wized, on the input field, we have the Wized attribute of email address applied to it so that we can just get that email and work with it in Wized. And for the submissions on the form, we also have the Wized attribute of email form, as always, applied to that. So now that was it. And then we have the text in here, of course, also with the Wized attribute of Wized email client name. And we just have like a little icon from Relume icons, just like of an @ So that's it. Let's collapse this and let's actually go in here, add the class. Let's have this collapse. That should be our initial state because it's not really content flashing. It's more like content transitioning that we want to avoid here. Because it takes some time, so we want to have this as the initial state. Because when we open this in here, it will start initially like that as well. So we want to avoid any content flashing, even though it's a nice flashing because it has this wonderful transitions going on. So we can collapse that, and let's go to the warning panel. Sounds dangerous, but it's not. So we have this warning panel in here, and it's basically the same process. Just like that. With the only difference that I have on the parent element just a transition of 450, and when it collapses it, I changed it to only be at 200, so that the expanding takes longer than the collapsing. The collapsing is a bit quicker because the moment the user types it in, we want to get rid of the error fast, just from an UX UI perspective, just because I think that looks better. Get rid of that fast if the error was resolved. So we have like a more instant feedback. But you can really play with these animations however you want, because it's no code. You're just going to set the different transitions between classes, which is a super easy way then to make those things work and to interact with them. Now, in here, let's just remove that class. We, of course, have a Wized attribute of email error panel applied to it, and we have a little emoji in here, just like as a text with some styling, and we have our message, which is just static, but you could also add a Wized attribute in there if you want to base it on a variable and make it dynamic. And for this form, we're going to ignore the success message or the error message, because we just have them as the Webflow default, because we don't really need that, because we're preventing default in Wized anyway. So let's collapse everything and let's make sure to publish that, and we are good to go into the Wized part of this. So let's go to Wized. Let's refresh the canvas just like that. Let's get rid of one password. Hide on this page. Wonderful. Okay, perfect. So now let's start with the logic. First of all, if I'm going to type Joe at, we get this recommendations. That of course also works for Wized dev at, works for everything at. So let's go to this email client suggestions panel and see how this is being defined. So we just simply have the attribute for the email suggestions panel, and we're going to do the set class for is collapsed. That was the attribute that we have added on top of that element in Wized to create this wonderful transition. So this is our state right now. And we want to tell Wized that this combo attribute, this combo class here, excuse me, it's a class, this combo class that I have in here, we want to target this one, because this is the one that if I remove it will cause this animation. And if I add it, will cause the animation in reverse. So I want to target this class, and I want to do if this email address, which, oh, I gotta add some formatting here. Let's just add like a little bit of space. Wonderful. Perfect. Now we got it all online. But we see we have this input field for email address, right? And if I just simply do like this email address, if it doesn't include an at, so we're just reversing that with the quotation mark. We want to look out for that. And we want to do or if the email address is longer than 0. And we do a test if it contains an at, and if after the at there is some random text, and if after the random text, after the at is a dot, is a period, and after the period there is some random text. This is basically what this is looking for. Then we're going to return a value. So this is basically checking for two things. First instance, there is no at in here. If there is no at in here, or actually there is an at in here, because we have to reverse it, because we start initially without it, with this is collapsed. So in order for it to be on there, it needs to be false. So basically what will happen, I have this email address, which right now contains an at. Let's actually get rid of that for easier understanding this. I have this at in here, right? Now, if I were to do it like this, it will say, yes, there is an at. But now it would just collapse it, right? If there is an at in here, let's add an at. Just like that, you see, we have an at in here. it will just have it collapsed. So we need to reverse this, because the moment I want to add an at in here, I want to give this at option. Just like that. You see, if I type anything in here, it doesn't work. But if I add an at, it works. You can also use this principle amazingly for a username thing. Like if you add a username, you can suggest some usernames. But now let's go in here. Now the other part of that logic is saying or, if the email that we have in here, which right now there is nothing, is greater than the length of 0. So the length is greater than 0. So meaning there is something typed in, and it passes our basic email test to see, basically the email test will be random text at random text dot random text. This is how you pass our email check. As you can see, I passed the email check because it doesn't say anything. This is what what this part, the regex code, is looking out for, the regular expression, right? And we're doing the dot test, and we define it based on this. This is how you pass our test. It's going to give you a true, right? Now, if you don't pass it, there is nothing after this. We will have, I mean, we can prettify too, but we will get a false. Just like that. Look at that. Now, if I do like this, we're going to pass our test. We will get a true. And actually, let's just unprettify that, because I think it's easier to understand it that way. Perfect. Now, again, this is how we fail our test. Just like that. This is how this is working. This is what the code is basically working on. And now, let's add this list again. Because now after we got this expanded, we need to render the items in here. So, over here at 1a, we have the client item. So we have those items in which we want to render the list to show the dynamic email options. Now, you can render this from your database. You can hard code this in however you want. But in this example, I just have a variable called email clients. And we just simply have an array of objects with the extension of the email provider's domain, like gmail.com, yahoo.com, icloud.com. We don't need to add an at. We just need to add it like .com. But you can variate that however you want to have that fit for your use case. Now, if I go back and I will go to 1a, you will see that I'm just taking this item and I'm rendering a list. I'm just going to take this variable and I will render a list from that. And then I have a separate action that if I click on any of those, if I click on this item, for example, I have an onEvent, click, prevent default, and then I'm going to run a function to basically do following. I want to take the email address, which is basically our input field value, and I want to manually set it. Because, let me show you the example. If I'm going to type in Joe at, and now I click on Gmail, you see that it's modifying the input here to show at gmail.com. And this is exactly what I want to do in here as well. So if I go in here, and let's just show those, I click on here, and I will have my input field, and I'm going to have the input field equal the value that is currently in the input field, and then I'm going to replace what this part is basically doing. It's looking for the at, and it's taking everything after the at. This is this part basically. This part is looking for the at, and then it's removing the at, and it's adding after where the at used to be another at. I could just keep that, but I couldn't figure out how to do that. So it's basically removing the at, adding a new at right in here. That's my substitution for that. And then it's going to do plus, and it's taking the dynamic value of the item that I clicked on. Now, this is high level, but it's actually not. We're just going to take our variable, and here's the wonderful thing. The v.iterator, which we're going to apply on there, is actually Wized's targeting super feature. And then we're going to do basically dot extension to get like the extension yahoo.com, iCloud.com. But what the v-iterator does, and this is really powerful, if I just add the v-iterator, Wized takes care of everything. Let's do Joe at, you see if I click on Yahoo, it will add Yahoo. If I click on Gmail, it will add Gmail. If I click on Gmail, it's not adding Yahoo, right? Look at that. I click on Gmail. It's not adding Yahoo. It's adding Gmail, the one that I clicked on. And this is the super feature that Wized gives us using the v-iterator. What the v-iterator basically is doing, it's taking the dynamic value I click on, doing all the calculations on the back end, and making sure that only the value I clicked on will be considered in this function. If I were to take the v-iterator and change this to 1, no matter where I click on, I will get a wrong value. Let's do on FinSuite, it will add Yahoo. Let's click on Wized, it will add Yahoo. Let's click on iCloud, it will add Yahoo. Let's click on Yahoo, it will add Yahoo. But it's 90% of the times wrong because it just will add Yahoo. In order to prevent this, we're going to go in here and we're going to use the v-iterator. This is our super feature. Now, if I click on Gmail, it will add Gmail. If I click on iCloud, it will add iCloud. And of course, if I click on Yahoo, it will add Yahoo. So this is what the v-iterator in this part is doing. Let's get rid of that. And that is this part. Wonderful. Now, let's go to the next part. We are just going to set the name in here. So we're just going to target this element in here that will contain the text, just like that. And we're going to do set text, plain text. And again, we have our friend, the v-iterator. We're going to do v.emailClients. That's our variable. We're going to use the extension and we're going to do the v-iterator. Now, in this example, the v-iterator is ensuring that for the Gmail item, the Yahoo item, and the iCloud item, and so on, it is always showing the matching text that relates to this object, this item in the array, other word for list. And now let's take the next one. Now we have the error. So let's try submitting that and we're going to get an error. This error is basically targeting the error element. Let's go to the warning panel. And you see, if I add collapsed in here, it's doing the same thing as we did before. So if I'm going to go in here and this set class, which is exactly the same principle we have done above here, is based on a variable. So I target the is collapsed, and I'm going to do if this variable, which is defined in here, which is v.isEmail, doesn't equal false, which is false, right? Because it equals false, I will show this. If, let's add a real email in here. If this is now empty because it's wiped out, it doesn't equal false, right? Because it's wiped out. So, since this doesn't equal false, I will get a true. And because I get a true, I removed the class, just like this. Think of it like this. I have the class in here, right? Just like that. Or actually, I added the class, sorry. I have it like this, and now this calculation doesn't match anymore, so this is what's happening here. So what Wized is doing, we have this right now, this will equal true, because it's empty, it doesn't equal false, therefore it's true, and since this is true, it's adding the isCollapsed class on top of this item that we target by Wized attribute. And this is what Wized is doing. Wized is saying, okay, we got this element. Okay, condition. Let's check on here again. Let's do this. Okay, this is supposed to be not false. This is empty, so it's not false. Yes, this is true. Perfect. Okay, command true. Let's do this. Let's add this on here because it's showed me that I have to do this because it said true. This is what Wized is doing here on a high level. And that is basically what's going on in here. Now, we're going to go to the wipeout function. This is my favorite. Because if I'm going to type a wrong email, for example, just like this, the moment I add a .com, it's removing both the suggestion and the error message. But the moment I recreate an error, I have the option to correct it, but if I try to submit it, I will get reminded that I did something wrong. But if I correct it, it's going to update it because it's wiping out the state. Let's look at the variable here to understand how this works. If I'm going to submit a wrong email and click on here, on trying to submit this, I'm going to set is email false because I tried to submit something false. Now, if I'm going to go to correct this, I will do .com. The moment I corrected it, we see that the Wized variable got wiped out, right? Because we don't evaluate something right now. We don't want to say it's true or it's false. We just want to do the moment it's true, we stop the evaluation. Of course, you can update the logic however you want to then evaluate it or say it's true or not. We just want for this variable in this example to just flag this if something is wrong, but of course you can refine the logic. So if I have it wrong, just like this, I try to submit it, it will say false. But the moment I do it right and it will get initialized, it will wipe it out. So let's go into the function that will actually wipe this out. So we have this wipe email error and that's conditional. So I just simply have a custom condition in Wized that, and this is basically the regex for saying it's an email, it's a legitimate email. We do .test. This is how we're going to test a regular expression. This is basically a function saying this is an email or not. And I'm going to base this on i.email address. And then this will be right now true because it's an email address, right? Perfect. Now I want to run a function that if this is an email address, I want to run a function to take this variable saying is email to equal an empty string. Now I could also do true as I mentioned earlier. Then it would just be true. That will work the same way. Let's look at that. I will have this now true. But now my issue with that is this will only get triggered if I click on here. So this is why I didn't want it to use true initially, because if I do type it like this, it will be true. But if I all of a sudden have it wrong, and this is not an email address, it will still say true because the way it's being calculated in this example. Now you can refine that. It will only be recalculated if I click on here. This has the reasoning because we don't want to show the error message while the user is typing. If I'm going to try to correct something, I think it would be very annoying if I get the message, yeah, what you're typing right now, I know you're not done, but it's still not right. This is not a nice user experience. So this is why we only want to update this variable when the user tries to submit something or do an action here, to not just have this annoying banner while the user is in progress, because the user knows that this is wrong, right? But it's in progress. So this is why I liked to not have it true, because if you have to do some other logic in the back end of your front end to evaluate if it's true or not, this would falsify the thing. So I recommended, or I suggested, clearing that out and maybe implementing some later logic on to have a different variable show the state if you have a different process going on in the backend, unrelated from showing this to the user from a visual experience. And now, as you can see, basically the whole thing that this is based on, I type Joe, yahoo.com, and I click on submit. Or if I add something wrong and click on submit, it will add this error. So we have this form element because now the last part is submitting that. Or if the user tries to submit it and it's wrong, setting the variable to then show that it's wrong to trigger this error accordion animation, basically. So I have my form, and you have to apply this not on the form block or anywhere else or on the input or on the submit button anymore. You have to go to the form. This is the one that has a steering wheel here. And you just have to add the Wized attribute on top of there. Now, if I'm going to go to on event, I will do a submit action. I will prevent default. Otherwise, I would be submitting this as a form submission and would get an email every time. And I will just do a run function. Now, I will simply do it like this. v.isEmail will equal the result of this function, which this random string of gibberish, .test, which is the computer way of saying validate if that's a real email. And we're going to base this function on the value I.email address. That is the one, that is the input variable of this item that is related to this item, where I will be able to type some things in here, just like that, this input field. And whatever is the result, let's look at the result. Right now, this result would be false, right? But we don't have anything in here. Now I'm going to take my variable v.isEmail, and I will have this equal the result. Now, since this is false, if I run this, we will see that this v.isEmail will also equal false. So if I click on it, it will equal the test result. And we do this again to not have this banner while the user is correcting something. Unless it's wrong, right? If it's correct like this, we will stop it. And if the user is typing like this, and for example, think of it like this from a UX perspective, I will do goog.com, and I know, oh, I did Google. Needs to be Google, just like that. We don't want to remember the user, oh, what you're typing right now is wrong. We only want to remember the user if the user tries to submit something wrong. And I think I just broke that. Or no, it's actually a real domain. Let's remove the period. If I click on this, we want to remember the user, what you tried to submit doesn't work. You need to add a period. Now, if the user adds a period, it will remove it, right? But we don't want to show this red message if it's not a real email. Because right now, this thing is not a real email. But we don't show the error that it's not a real email because the user hasn't tried to interact with it or to submit something that's not right. Now, this action will be only triggered on submit and then equal the value of the variable based on what came out with this test to see if what's in here is an email. So if I click on here, this test came back negative as false. Now this function is taking this variable and the result from the test, which was false, will be the value, the thing that is in this variable, which will be false. And then based on that is false, we have the condition in here that will say that if this doesn't equal false, don't show it. But if this equals false, then remove the collapsed attribute and therefore it will be shown. And this is how you're going to create such amazing email input onboarding flows. And it also taught you today how to work with wonderful animations to have, as you can read in here, smooth animations in your Wized and Webflow applications. And I really hope that this little live build helped you to really level up your animations and your experiences that you're going to build in Wized. And thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for your time. And I hope that you're going to build as smooth and as amazing, and even more amazing and even more smooth, flows in Wized that really take your user to the next dimension. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for your time. If you have any questions, please put them down in the comments. I'm always happy to respond and to help out. Also, thank you so much for all your wonderful Discord messages and for all your encouraging support and comments. I really appreciate that. And thank you so much for everything. And as always, see you tomorrow. Bye bye.